Hello, and welcome to the first installment in the webinar series, What You Need to Know for Remote Working with Microsoft Teams. The series is hosted by Harmony and Solutions to Share. Today's webinar shares what you need to know to manage emails with Teams, and it will be delivered by Harmony. Later this month, on the 24th at the same time, we'll be running the second installment, which will be presented by Solutions to Share. Before we begin the webinar, I would like to introduce the webinar sponsors, Solutions to Share and Harmony. From Solutions to Share, we have Christian Gross, Solutions to Share CEO. Christian, please.
Hi guys, my name is Christian Groß and I'm the CEO of Solutions to Share. We make solutions for Microsoft SharePoint and Teams for over 10 years now, and I want to introduce you my company in a few slides. Can we go to the first slide, please? So the Solutions to Share is founded in 2011, and we already have 18 employees here in Germany. So Solutions to Share is a company completely based in Germany, and with our tools, which we developed the last 10 years, we have over 15,000 installations from the SharePoint or from the Microsoft Teams App Store. We are focused in developing collaboration tools for SharePoint Online and Microsoft Teams. And if you want to try one of our solutions, just go to the Teams App Store and type, for example, Teams Manager. On the next slide, you see what we are focused in the last years. If you can go to the next slide, please. And you see here that Solution to Share is focused on provisioning and governance part in the universe of Microsoft. We started with Microsoft SharePoint Server 2010, and in the years we migrated to 2013, 16, and 19. And of course, we have our solutions in SharePoint Online and with modern sites, classic sites, and communication sites. And I think 2 years ago, we started developing a provisioning and governance solution for Microsoft Teams. And so we have for all kinds of SharePoint Teams, SharePoint Online or on-premises, a provisioning and governance solution, which is a one-click install solution. So you have a multi-tenancy application which needs no separate installation in your Azure environment, and in one day you are ready to go to provision SharePoint sites, Teams, or define governance policies to control your environments. The next slide, please. So if you want to have a governance solution for Microsoft Teams only, go to the Teams App Store and have a look for the Teams Manager. If you need M365 provision and governance engine, just contact us and ask for the Collaboration Manager. And we also have some other collaboration tools like the Meeting Manager to organize meeting with agenda tasks and decisions. Or we have a small solution for document templates. And yeah, if you are interested in collaboration solutions for Teams and SharePoint, just go to our website and have a look and ask for a demo. So that is Solutions to Share, and I wish you a good webinar now with David.
Thank you, Christian. I will introduce the Harmony speaker in just a moment, but first, a couple of housekeeping items. You are welcome to submit questions at any time using the chat window on your screen. We'll address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. If we don't manage to answer all of your questions, someone will follow up with you shortly via email. Don't worry, we'll also make a recording of this webcast available to you within a couple of days. Let me introduce you to today's speaker, David Lavender, Chief Product Officer at Harmony. David has served as an executive in enterprise software, mobile, security, and networking companies. David is an international scholar for the Society for the History of Technology, a founding member of the Humanizing the Digital Workplace Consortium, and a longtime contributor to CMS Wire. Before we start, we'd like to ask you a question. What are you using Teams for? Please select all that apply. Meetings, chats, using other features of Teams, or not using Teams. I'm waiting for all of you to answer. One more second, and we'll see the result. Okay. Okay. David, now to you.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for that, Maya. So it looks like people using Teams and chat, you know, the very high numbers, 80, 70, 81% meetings, 71% chat, which is pretty much what I'd expect. And 56% using other features of Teams. We'll come back to that a little bit later during the webinar and dig into that a little bit deeper. But these numbers are pretty much what we'd expect to see. Looking at the numbers that Microsoft has been putting out, Teams adoptions is absolutely off the charts, particularly for meetings in Teams. Jared Spataro, Corporate Vice President at Microsoft, at the end of April, gave an interview based on some of the numbers that the CEO of Microsoft was using, and they're looking at an increase, an insane increase of the number of users of Teams. 200 million Teams meeting participants, 75 million daily users. I mean, the numbers went up from about 12 million a few months earlier to about 200 million. And this is what Microsoft calls 2 years of digital transformation in 2 months. So if you're like most folks that I've been speaking with in the last 6 months, pretty much everyone had plans to move to Teams, but not too many people thought they were going to move quite as quickly to Teams as they did. And it makes a lot of sense why, because you know, as people were stuck at home, sheltering in place during the lockdown, it makes sense that what you want to do is you want to be able to reach out to colleagues, feel that you're connected to people, be able to continue the business. And Teams is perfect for that, looking at meetings, being able to do video calls, audio calls, chat conversations, the very simple capabilities that are built into Teams that don't require a lot of configuration and enable people to feel connected. So the numbers that we see in our poll for the participants here, absolutely in line with what Microsoft is showing as well. Now, one of the things that as people get started early with Teams is it's easy to get started with meetings and with chat. Of course, as you start to get further down the line, you start to run into some of the problems involved with too many channels. All of a sudden, you don't know where the conversations are going, and that's exactly what the Solutions to Share Team Manager is great for, those types of governance of getting you started, and we'll hear about that in the next webinar. In the next webinar series. But as you start to move forward in Teams, you know, you kind of get that early hit with meetings and video and chat and audio calls. The next phase, when you want to take advantage of the Teams platform, which was quite robust, is, you know, getting involved in the business processes that you're running and devising workflows that incorporate other tools together with Teams. And that's when things really start to get a little bit complicated. So it's not surprising that we see people mostly using the easy features in Teams and not as much some of the other features just quite yet. But as I said, you know, meetings, remote, particularly with these remote workers, Teams and meetings and chat is great to get started. But remote work is more than that. You know, as people stay home, the initial feeling is great. You know, we can connect with other people, we can reach out, we can feel like we're a part of something. But very quickly, what happens is you start to realize that when you're running business processes, is that, it's a bit difficult. For example, even one of the simplest cases is, you're working on a daily basis with customers and partners and suppliers, and inevitably that means working with documents. And Teams does have document integration, which in reality relies on SharePoint on the back end, but it's not as well integrated as it can be, where it's work in progress. So it may be easy to plug a document into a conversation when you're going along, but later on when you need to find that, it's a bit more difficult, because the organization and classification of documents can require some work. And the shame of this is that as you're starting to get the value out of Teams, the capabilities are there. It would be wonderful to take advantage of all the capabilities, including the ability to do document management and build on everything that's been done in SharePoint. But that's that's going to take a little bit of work, because that requires a change in user behavior in order to be able to use some of those features. It's not as intuitive as just clicking on join a meeting and using the microphone and so on. So as we specifically start talking about documents in Teams, we'd like to do another quick poll and look at how often you're using Teams for document management. So the question is, do you save, access, and share documents using Teams? Do you rarely, never, rarely, occasionally, frequently, or all the time? And what we want to get in a sense here is really, where are we at that stage of the market where where we're early on, where people are just using the initial features, or have people started to take advantage of some of the capabilities of documents as well? That's really the next phase in the Teams adoption evolution, is moving on to documents, or what is called in the Teams world, files. Okay, so we've got it closed. We see that about 18% never, 25% rarely, 25% occasionally. And if we're looking at the frequently and all the time, we've got about a third of the people on this on the webinar say that they're using sharing documents or accessing documents frequently or all the time, and about 2/3 either occasionally or down to never. And again, very much fits in with, I think, the Microsoft numbers. Certainly what we're seeing in the market is that people are getting started early with Teams, using the easy features and not taking advantage yet of some of the integration with SharePoint and some of the back-end capabilities. Another question we have as you start to work with Teams is, particularly people who are working from home and remotely, how do you work with people who are outside your company? So, a lot of the focus on Teams has been how to connect with your colleagues, how to connect with people to be able to work when you're physically remote from people. But when you start to work with people outside the company, the world starts to change a little bit. So, one thing is that when you're working with outside partners, you may want to be able to do same things, meetings and chat, but oftentimes the company at the end of the day is working with customers. Every company has customers that you're selling to. So, do you want to be able to connect with these people? Of course, you can use Teams. You can create guest accounts for people so they can participate in conversations, and they can join you and with things like that. But it starts to, when it comes to managing business with partners, such as working on projects or accounts, it gets a little more complicated. So for that, many of us continue to rely on email. So for example, when you're exchanging project status reports or redlining contract drafts or sending and receiving official documents, email still appears to be the universal tool. It's convenient, it's universal, you can send it to anybody, that doesn't require special permissions. And because we've been doing that for 20 years and there's a lot of muscle memory built into that process, it seems that contact with outside your company still involves a lot of work with email. I mean, there might be people internally using email as well, but in the evolution of moving to Teams, the question is how much do you still rely on email for communicating, and we're going to ask that in terms of communicating with external parties like customers, suppliers, and partners. So we're going to ask that one more poll just to get a sense of where the folks are in the market before we start to talk a little bit about the solution. And what we're going to ask is, how do you collaborate with external parties like customers, suppliers, or partners? So you can answer more than one. Do you use Teams? Do you use email? Do you use Slack or some other chat app? Or do you use some other app that's not listed in one of those three? Okay, polls closed, and no surprises here. Email was 99%, so I think I can pretty much say that 100% of people are using email to communicate outside. Some are using Teams. Of course, there are like I said, there's the capability to be able to use the chat and to have meetings with people, so that makes sense. Not so many people using Slack, and about 22% using other tools. So that all makes sense. I think it's pretty much in line with what the official numbers are in the market. I think we have a good representative number, a group of people on the webinar who represent the market in general. These numbers seem to be clearly what's happening in the market. So the truth is that, as we just saw from the poll numbers, you still need email with Teams. The kind of this dream of we're going to move to a new platform and email is going to be out is, if at all, years away. Personally, I don't think that's going to happen for a variety of governance reasons, but certainly not happening in the short term. So we need to somehow reconcile email with Teams. And some things that I think people don't really think a lot about is that it's not just because it's easier or it's convenient or it's universal, you don't need permissions and so on. But when you start to communicate with people outside the company, every organization that you work with needs to have a complete record of the interactions. They need it for audits, they need it for business reviews, they'll need it for legal purposes. And yet today with Teams, when you have a partner or a supplier, any sort of partner, join you as a guest, whenever you sever contact with that particular partner, you lose all that access to the documents they have and vice versa. You have no record of any of the conversations. It all resides with the host. And because emails are business records that need to be retained, this is just not an acceptable solution. So email has a role not only because it's convenient and it's what people know, but it's a way of retaining both document and email records, and the ability to, of course, to be able to capture and classify them accurately so you can find them. These are all things that are built into the other tools that are not so obvious yet in Teams. And so this is something we need to keep into account is that we need to somehow create a world together with Teams that works together with email. Now, here's the challenge. There's really two major challenges, particularly for people who are working remote. And as we know, right now there's a lockdown and shelter in place and lots of people working from home. And it seems realistic that for the foreseeable future, many people are going to continue working in this fashion, even when offices start to open up. And the two main problems are, one is you have disconnected business conversations. So you have external conversations, as we just saw, on using email. Everyone's communicating externally with email. Internally, more and more communications with Teams. But then how do you see the big picture? If you're working on an account, you're working on projects, part of that conversation will be in email. Part of that conversation is in Teams. When you have audits and records, how do you reconcile the information? How do you put the big picture together when you've got two parallel universes running with Outlook and Teams? That's problem number one. Problem number two is that as you have this dichotomous environment where you've got email and Teams messages, people need to be self-sufficient at home. They don't have an IT person to ask. They can't just go out to the water cooler and ask Nancy how they're supposed to do some sort of operation or where they can find information. No, they need to be able to work independently. And when they work independently, a lot of times that involves shortcuts because you don't know where documents are. Sometimes you'll save them on a share drive locally, or you'll just put them on your local drive because you just want to be convenient. You want to have everything at hand. Later on, however, when you or another member of your team wants to be able to find documents, wants to be able to find information, big problem, because there's no way to have a centralized location where information is stored accurately. Now, again, the tools exist. We have Microsoft 365, the tools exist. It's just a little bit difficult to use them because we have some disjointed tools and some disconnected conversations. The key to solving this problem, again, is basically we have two problems. We have two ways of solving the problem. Number one, you need to make the right thing the easy thing to do. I always say technology is easy. Changing people's behavior is really, really difficult. Behavioral psychologists have written quite a bit about all sorts of biases that people prefer doing things that they have and they don't effectively evaluate alternatives because they're convinced that what they're doing is better than any alternative. You don't have the opportunity to train people. It's really difficult to get people to change their behavior and do what they want, get them to do what you want them to do in order so that the organization can benefit, so that all the information is in a centralized location, all the information is organized in a uniform way so that everybody can find it. The key is making the right thing the easy thing. Minimize the amount of change that people have to experience, and you will maximize the opportunity, the results that you get. So the classic question here is, how do I bring Outlook and Teams together in a seamless way so that people don't have to understand where the information is and be able to find everything that they're looking for? That's solution number one. Solution number two is being able to, a key to being able to find information is being able to have it in a centralized location and classified so that it uniformly, so that people can know where to look for it, and also know that even search will produce results that will deliver them what they're looking for. Again, how do you do it so that information doesn't reside on people's hard drives at home or some other Dropbox perhaps, or something which is convenient to each individual, but rather gets imported into the files location in Teams, gets imported into SharePoint, gets classified accurately, so that when you do the search, the information is already indexed and you can find the contracts, you can find the project status reports, you can find the account updates. All these things will be easily available to everybody on the team and not perhaps locked in somebody's inbox or on somebody's personal drive. Doing these things together will help people become more self-sufficient. If it's easy and information is available to everyone and they know where to find it and they're able to search for it, we'll go a long way to making remote work effective using the Microsoft 365 toolset. So the question is, how do you make this easy? That's always it's a great story. The question is, how do you actually do this in principle? So at Harmony, we believe that there are three main pillars of principles that you need to keep in order to be able to fulfill the requirements to make things easy for people and so that they can be self-sufficient. One, stay in people's comfort zone. People today continue to work in Outlook. Outlook is where they've been for the last 20 years. You need to provide some sort of transition path, some sort of evolutionary path for people who are in Outlook so they can move to Teams and they don't open up Teams and all of a sudden have a separate user experience and that they don't see any sort of connection between the two. Make that simple so that people, when they're alone and stressed out, they don't have to worry about what they're supposed to do. Don't try to change behavior. Training doesn't work. Email updates with instructions don't work. Just minimize the changes that they have. And we're going to take a look at that just in a brief moment, and we'll see exactly how that works and how simple this can be. Two, simplify the capture and classification of information so that it gets stored in a centralized location available to everybody on the team, whether it's SharePoint or Teams. Make it available and classified so that people can do a search and find that information. It could be contracts, it could be account updates, project plans, engineering documents, deeds, property deeds. It could be 1,001 different types of documents. Everyone knows what the kind of documents you have in your own organization. Make it easy for people to put it into place. And the idea is that so if you capture it in a centralized location and classify it accurately, you will be able to find it afterwards. Being able to search, absolutely critical. search and context of where you are in your path of what you're doing with work. Make that easy so people can find what they're looking for without having to go look around for that. Okay, so we talked about the problems, we talked about the solution, we talked about how the underlying principles in order to make this work. Now what I'd like to do is to do a short demo of the Harmony Smart Assistant, which is a new tool which is built on Harmony's existing Harmony Outlook plugin tool, which is being used by thousands of organizations today, and it just makes life totally simple, and a picture tells 1,000 words. So rather than talk a lot about the product, let me show you how it works, and it'll all be very clear. So with that, I'm just going to switch over to my Outlook window, which you should see just in a moment. Okay. So this is the Outlook window, and this is if 99% of the people on the webinar are using Outlook to communicate with other people, so this should be clear to everybody what it is that we're seeing here. What you'll notice on the right side of the screen is a view of basically your centralized, all your centralized documents. So let's take a look at the favorites here for a moment. So we'll actually just take a look at all the everything we've got. So you can see here that I've got all my locations. You can see here I've got teams, all my teams and groups. I got my OneDrive, and I've got all my SharePoint locations that are connected in my environment. So we just go to the favorites. Favorites makes it quite easy. And what you can see here is I've got a number of teams that I'm working on. So I'm part of an accounts team. This is Annie Tucker is an account manager, and she's working with a number of customers, working right now on a deal with a possible merger with another company. And the emails that she's exchanging with outside people here talk about things like, you know, some of the let's see, some of the merger capabilities. Let's go back here. So you'll see there's some mergers, there's some documents here that I'm getting from outside from some consultants. And what's happening here is we're working on a deal with Glory Incorporated. We're thinking to maybe perhaps merge with this company, and we're working together with outside consultants to help us describe what that merger would look like. Now, this is an email that I got from a outside company from this consultant. And this is clearly information that I want to share with colleagues, because they're talking about the plan, they're talking about the structure. I want to bring this into the company and start a conversation internally. And the tool for discussions internally is clearly Teams. So how do I take this outside conversation that we're having and bring it into Teams? The answer is really simple. What I do is I just take the email and I drag it over onto the team, and you'll see when I drag it over onto the team, it expands and I see the channels. One of the channels is Glory Inc. And when I drop the email onto Glory Inc., what Harmony will do is it actually will upload the email and the 2 document attachments to the files location of the Glory team channel. So and then what I can do is I can click on start a conversation, and now I have the opportunity not only to move the email, which is a business record, and the 2 attachments into the files location of this channel where the conversation is taking place, but I can also embed a message into the conversation saying that that these documents have been uploaded. So I can notify people, and of course I can also notify people who are really important in the process. So I can say, for example, to Fred, Fred is really important to this process. So I can say, Fred, take a look at the new merger docs. And when I do post, what we'll see in a moment is those documents get uploaded into Teams, and when I click on continue the conversation in Teams, you'll see that I go right into my Teams application, and I can see the conversation taking place right here. So it's here. Fred Neal, take a look at these new merger docs, and you see the email and the merger and the plans, the email and the documents all stored in one location. If there was metadata required for this particular files location, we would be prompted for metadata, and I'll show how that works in just a moment. So that not only do you capture that information in a centralized location, but you also have the opportunity to prompt the user as part of the upload process for metadata so that they can specify information to make it easily found by other people. Now, there's a lot of, you see, there's a lot of documents being stored along the way in this conversation. And this is part of the problem of the disconnection between email and documents. Again, we've got emails, we've got documents, we've got Teams. How do you find this information? So one of the ways that we've, kind of a simple way that we've added is in the files location. In the files location for the Teams, you'll see that we're looking at all the documents that are associated. Many of these we've dragged in using Harmony. I've done this in earlier demos, but you see there's a mixture. So how do I find the information? What we've done is we've created a email view. You'll see on the right side, an email view. And when I select that, I get all the emails that are that I've uploaded to the Teams chat, to the Teams channel files location. Now, one of the interesting things you'll see here is that we have automatically captured all the header information from the email as metadata in the files location of the Teams channel. Automatically, nobody has to specify it, nobody has to add any information. As I said before, making the right thing the easy thing to do is key. It is the key to making sure that people do the right thing and you get the maximized results. So you see here that the metadata has automatically been, it's the subject, the from, the to, attachments, date. This information now becomes available for search, so that when you want to search for these types of documents or emails, it is indexed, it is be able to find that information. User doesn't have to do anything, it's right out of the box. So this is absolutely key in being able to do that, those processes. Okay, so going back to my Outlook window for a moment. So of course, this information, this can be done. I showed this with Teams. Many of you out there are probably still working with SharePoint or have SharePoint sites. So as you'll see here that there's also SharePoint capabilities. I'm going to take, say, another email here, and I'm going to drag this one into our legal folder from SharePoint. This is a this actually in this case is an on-premises SharePoint. It also could be 365. It's exactly the same user experience. The whole concept is make it easy for users. They don't have to know what's happening. Now you know that when I drag these elements in, it's the email and there's 3 attachments. There are some, we get a pop-up window asking to specify metadata. So some of these are marked with a red dot. You'll see some of these are red dot. That signifies that these are required fields. Some of it is automatically captured, but you have the opportunity to change it, making it again very simple. So in this case, we can say maybe it's a document, and you can do classification, and you can specify what type of classification it is, and so on. You can, if you want to, in this case, you have to specify a client. So I'm going to say this is Glory, and then when I do a save, all that information gets automatically saved as metadata. So again, the user doesn't have to go into the web browser, specify the metadata. We know people don't do that. We know people don't want to do anything. If we make it difficult, if it's more than a single step, people will find a way to circumvent it, and you'll end up getting 0 value. You'll end up with document repositories in SharePoint and now in Teams that are basically document graveyards. So make this super easy. That's the key to being able to do this. Now, of course, there's lots of other capabilities that are built into the product. So, for example, if I want to, I can also access the SharePoint site. So if I double click on the SharePoint site, I have full access to these, to the documents here. I can right click on them, show a preview of them. So if I'm looking for something, I can see it right here in the window without having to open it fully and see everything. I can see that right here. and it just makes it super easy to do. Now, one thing that we've added fairly recently is also the ability to assign retention labels. So you know that Microsoft has retention labels for record keeping because a lot of the information that's stored centrally and categorized, classified in SharePoint and now in Teams are records that need to be found later on. We enable you to apply the Compliance Center retention label right out of the box. Basically, just right-click on a document, and you can apply that label right here without having to go elsewhere and do that. And of course, that works also for the Teams file location as well. So, for example, if I go back to my Teams to the Glory channel, if I double-click on it, you'll see that I now have the ability to see the file's location, also directly in email. So if I want to have a view of all the documents that are in that Teams channel, I can do it right from here. I can search. I'll show you search in just a moment. And of course, you can do all the same type of operations. As we know, the Teams channel file location is basically a special SharePoint location. So a lot of the same capabilities are available right out of the box. We do have the capability of being able to do search from here. So you can search, and we're making some really big new. You can find things things related to Glory, and of course I can, also find the location for some of these. So I can open containing folder, so I can go find out where that location is directly in Teams or in SharePoint and be able to navigate to that point directly. We're adding new capabilities in search. I'd like to show that. Let me go back to the slides because this is not yet functioning, but this is something that's coming shortly, is the ability to do more contextual search. So for example, when you want to do a search, you also will automatically be given the ability to search by the metadata directly in the window, so that instead of having to go to the browser, instead of having to go somewhere else, you're working on something in email. Again, we have disconnected conversations. You're talking with people externally with about deals. What you want to be able to do is to have access to those documents and emails that you want to reference when you're speaking with them. You don't have to open another application. You don't have to go somewhere else. You can literally find it directly in the Outlook window using the metadata. So you'll see that the metadata that's displayed here are some of the email metadata capabilities. You'll also be able to customize this and add columns that you want to be able to filter by and add metadata fields here so you can make it easy for people to find information, whether you want to do it by project or you want to do it by service or by customer or by account. Any way that's convenient for you, you make it very easy for people to find that information, reduce the amount of effort that they need to be able to go and start digging for it and looking for it in different places. Just make it available to them in the place that they spend their time, their comfort zone, which is Outlook. So you can see here I can do author, and then I just type a name, and then I'll get all the information that's related to that particular individual. So that's very quickly a short demo of Harmony and a description of the integration between Outlook and Teams. We believe going forward that as Teams gains more traction, as people start to use it more for documents, that the need to integrate email and Teams is going to grow. Harmony is the linchpin that connects the two. We make it extremely easy for people to bridge the gap between Outlook and Teams without having to worry about where the information is. And that, we believe, is the key to success, because we don't want to be able to have to train people in order to use the tools. So what we want to do is build on the success of Teams. We know that you've adopted Teams for meetings and chat. Build on that success, go to the next step, but don't make that next step really a tough one that requires a lot of a training or a lot of rollout or a lot of explaining to do. Minimize that behavioral change. Just make it easy for people to do the right thing. Oftentimes, you don't even have to explain to them what the different components are. If they can drag and drop into SharePoint or Teams, by the way, I didn't show that you also can drag back between Teams and also add a link to a document or an email directly in email and send it that way. just making it swipe left and right is something that people know how to do, and it's just super simple. This enables people to be self-sufficient. They know how to work with the tools they have because they don't have to learn something new. They know where the information is. They can search for it because it's classified and categorized. It's stored in a centralized location, so it's available to everybody. And these are really the keys to be able to see success, continued success with teams, and really go on to the next phase, to be able to focus on business rather than focus on manipulating the technology and the tools, which is always the key to adopting new technology for business. So with that, we just wanted to note that before we take questions, Maya, did you want to do the next poll here?
Yeah. Okay. Last poll question. Would you like a free trial? You can select multiple answers. If you want a trial for Harmony Smart Assistant, or if you want a trial for Solutions to Share, Teams Manager, which Christian presented at the beginning. I see that you are still answering. Okay. Okay, David, do you want to move to the Q&A session?
Yeah. Okay, so maybe just before we move to the Q&A, do you want to mention something about the next webinar, or?
We'll do it at the end, maybe.
Okay, very good. So I got a bunch of questions, a lot of questions that came in. I won't be able to answer all of them. Those questions that are that we are not able to answer, somebody will follow up with you within the next day with a written answer. But we do appreciate the interest in some of these are some good questions. So just to go through some of these, question says, my company already uses Harmony. Do I need to pay extra to get support for Teams? Or do I need a special version of software? You don't need a special version, and there is no extra fee for using the support for Teams. You do need, however, version 8 or above for Harmony, which has been out probably now for about 8 has been out for about 6 months. 8.1, which is a significant upgrade, came out at the end of April, and I suggest you use that version if you're testing Teams. Question number 2, you talk a lot about Teams, but my company still has documents on SharePoint on-premise. Do you support SharePoint on-premise, or does that require a separate product? No, it's one product. Everything that you saw for Teams works also for SharePoint, SharePoint 365 or online, or SharePoint on-premises. When you drag it across, the information gets uploaded. You can apply metadata. You can drag documents or emails back and create links. It works exactly the same. Now, of course, there are some capabilities that are built into specifically SharePoint Online or Teams that require support from Microsoft. So some of those things won't be supported for on-premises, but anything that's supported, all the on-premises capabilities are supported for the Harmony as well. The question asks, is there a way to upload multiple emails and documents to SharePoint, or do you have to do them one at a time? One of the great things about what you can do with Harmony is the ability to upload multiple documents and emails at once. In fact, we have many customers who use what we call the bulk migration capability of Harmony. You can grab lots of different documents and emails, and when you can upload them, you are prompted for the metadata automatically. So the user, just like I showed you when I dragged that email with a couple of attachments, you can apply the metadata across all the emails and documents. You can do this for huge numbers of documents. And by allowing people to migrate what they want to upload, you reduce the clutter and you eliminate migration projects that involve consultants coming in and trying to figure out what to migrate. You just let people pick what they want to keep before you shut off some of the old local drives and shut out some of the archive, some of the mail, and allow people to pick themselves what they want to upload and do that in a very streamlined and extremely efficient manner. Okay, so there's a couple other questions here. Smart Assistant, I answered some of these. How is metadata applied to Teams? It is a manual admin task. So the metadata is applied to the documents in the same way it is to SharePoint. Out of the box, there is no metadata assigned to the file location, but it can be set up. You can apply metadata. That is a admin task to apply the metadata to the Teams file location. Once it's done, though, there's no work to do in Harmony. That will be done automatically. It'll just be applied. People will be prompted for it. Somebody asked, is the email view native from Teams? So if you click on an email within Teams, depending on how your Teams is configured, it will either open it in place using the native app, or it can save the file. It's an MSG file. It really depends on how you configure Teams. We support both ways out of the box for that. Somebody asked here about a conversation initiated in Teams, putting that into a SharePoint site. We don't yet integrate the conversations into SharePoint to capture that. That is an interesting proposition going forward, but we do not yet do that. There will be some new capabilities coming from the future that give some, like we now have the ability to work from Outlook and integrate into Teams. Will be some capabilities in Teams that will bring emails in directly, and that's exciting, but that'll be coming later this year. Okay. Program does not work for Macintosh. Is this correct? Are there plans to provide for this in the future? We do have an OWA version, which is a web app, which can be downloaded directly from the Microsoft App Store, which does work in the Mac. It's not a native app running in the Outlook for the Mac Outlook program, but it does run as a sidebar both in the app, the web app, and also in the desktop app. Somebody asks how much is one license? So just the way we license the product, it's a minimum of 15 licenses. There is no one license, but there is an ability to do an enterprise trial, which you can do directly from our website. Somebody asked what the difference between Harmony and the Harmony Smart Assistant is. Harmony Smart Assistant is really the new version of Harmony that supports Teams. It's from version 8 and forward. It is basically the same next generation product as the original Harmony Outlook or the Harmony Enterprise product. So it is not a different product line. It is a new brand that supports the Teams. Somebody asked here if we support Outlook web app. So I just mentioned that we do. Does this product work with WebEx Teams? No, we don't work with WebEx Teams. Let's see, I'm not going to have time. There's tons of questions here. So somebody asked here, can you classify Office 365 emails without bringing them into Teams? We do support bringing Office 365 emails into SharePoint. However, there's no way to classify the emails when they're locked in your inbox. The whole idea of bringing information and classifying emails is, it's like everything else with email. If somebody leaves the company or nobody has access to somebody else's inbox. So the classification of emails is not something that's supported. What we do is we first bring the emails into a centralized location like SharePoint or Teams channel, and then we enable to apply the metadata for that. Once metadata has been established, can it be altered? It can, yes, you can. We don't lock anything. The information is stored actually in the native SharePoint or Teams location if you go to the web browser, or you open up the item itself in In Harmony, you can edit the properties directly from there. Okay, I think there are a few other questions that we'll follow up with through email, but I think that's pretty much all we have time for, because there's a few other things we need to, as we're getting close to the top of the hour, we want to mention some of the other upcoming events. So I thank everybody for the participation and look forward to seeing you at our next event, and I'll turn it back over to Maya.
Thank you, David. Thank you for a great presentation, and thank all of you for joining us today. You're welcome to join us again on the 24th for our next webinar, the Governance Beginner's Guide for Microsoft Teams, How to Avoid Uncontrolled Growth. You can scan the QR to register for it. And you will receive an email from us with a link to view this webinar again within a couple of days. And as David said, if we didn't answer any of your questions, someone will follow up with you shortly via email. We look forward to meeting you again at our next webinar. Bye-bye.